Electric vehicles have reached price parity with gas counterparts in many market segments, but there's still a lack of adoption. And sure, some market segments are harder to crack into than others, but for the ones that already make sense, why isn't adoption higher? That's the question we're trying to address. I'm Brian. Welcome to Future Oza. I'm joined by my good buddy Herbert from the great state of confusion. He is here to help us understand a thing or two about a thing or 20.
Well,
how are you,
I'm
Herbert?
doing well, but I am confused. I'm confused why people are confused. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it's actually very logical why people are still very confused. And that's because, we are fighting a industry, right? The oil and gas industry. We're fighting the auto industry. We're fighting the people anti-Elon industry. And it's an industry.
The trade unions,
yeah,
the drivers,
and mainstream
industry.
Media, right? So mainstream media themselves, if you watch, and I know you do, CNBC every single day, they are perpetuating all these myths. They are absolutely, because who's advertising on their channels? Who's advertising on the news articles? You follow this so often. I think you've done a fantastic job where you track all the positive and negative sentiment against Tesla. So I'm not confused about why they're confused.
There's a whole mountain of money that stands to lose if Tesla wins. And when it comes to things within the Musk economy, they're all intertwined. When you see something like the astronauts going up on the first Crew Dragon, they were delivered to the launch pad in Model X's, white Model X's, and everyone was so excited about SpaceX. I want to invest. If you looked at the Google search trends, invest in SpaceX trended, and you can't do that. But the next day Tesla stock popped because it's all in the same thing. Let's look at this article here. This is fantastic. The mirror.co.uk. Drivers of traditional cars have really poor knowledge of EVs, shows a survey. Now this is UK drivers, but they found that more than half answered no more than 2 out of the 10 questions about EVs correctly.
Yeah.
It was a YouGov survey. It was a legit survey from a respected polling firm. And they found that, that they're just wrong. All the myths being peddled about EVs are misleading. Some petrol car drivers have a really poor knowledge. They don't know, they don't realize that petrol cars cost a lot more to own over its lifetime. And the constant stream of misinformation is clear. So I just asked on X, honest question, how cheap will EVs have to get before people start thinking of gas as the old and expensive way? They've already reached price parity, even if people don't realize it. How much cheaper do they need to get? 89,000 views. That's pretty good that's good for me. That's huge. And the answers I got were crazy. There were some people, pretty reasonably saying, 10 to 20% cheaper. Well, gas needs to go a little higher. So odd. No one mentioned the top comments are the good ones. But what I was seeing overwhelmingly was people saying, well, it has to do, and then they would say something it's already done. Yeah. Well, it has to be cheaper over the cost of the lifetime. Well, good news. What I hear you saying is we need more education. We need more outreach.
Yeah, we do. I mean, or like we just said at the beginning here, you're fighting misinformation that is prevalent. And so we need to fight back with information and outreach. So my own sister, one time I was at a bank and I'm talking to the person as I'm signing some documents. They said, what do you do? And then she goes, don't Tesla's batteries die within 2-3 years? Don't they all catch fire? Now, both of these people are very reasonable people. And I was able to say, no, that's not true. And I gave an example of a 2012 car. The Tesla's 2012 cars only have a 20% degradation or 10% degradation. My car since 2020, no degradation at all. And they're, okay, I just didn't know. Like, it wasn't vindictive in that case. So they just didn't know. And they're just hearing, and whatever they listen to, they believe. So it's not everyone's fault. But, like, that's the problem, is they have that issue, or Teslas are going and catching fire. What do I say to that? I say, well, you have a gas car with a combustional liquid inside of it. And you don't think that those catch fire and burst in flames more often than not? And they get it once you explain that. And I go, well, yeah, that's probably true. It sounds more true, logical. It's just that that's what they're hearing.
I saw people saying, I would never put my family on top of 1,000-pound fire hazard. Yeah. And I said, well, but you put your kids on top of a gas tank. No. Gas tanks are all the way in the back. My friend, you know less about automotive engineering in the ICE world than you do in the electric world, which is to say still none. Yeah. There are gas tanks that go under seats. The Explorer Sport has them. They tuck under the back seats. I think the Honda Element might even have a gas tank under the driver's seat.
These doesn't make a sense. Doesn't make zero sense. You're talking about a gas tank. It doesn't matter where it is in the frigging car. It's a tank.
It's designed to burn.
Yeah. So I think what you're just saying here, what you're revealing is that it's, price is the number one reason that people are choosing the vehicles. The number two is range anxiety, but it almost doesn't matter because all these other myths it's clouding all of these, these two issues. Like there's so many of these concerns.
Again, most petrol drivers score 2 out of 10. 57%, let's see, cost misconception. 62% of petrol drivers believe EVs are more expensive to own and run, while only 14% correctly recognized that EVs are typically cheaper. Fire risk, 41% incorrectly think they're more likely to catch fire. And then grid capacity myth, 60% of petrol drivers wrongly believe the UK's electricity grid can't handle it, even though the national grid has clarified that the power system will cope with millions more EVs. And a lot of this echoes what I was seeing. The range anxiety one is the big one. And I'll tell you, I see most, I don't know many EV drivers that actually have range anxiety. It's people who don't have them. I think the water cooler conversation is what's most likely to address this, where people can say to their coworker, no, I have one. It's really not a big deal. I leave the house on full every day, or whatever I decide is full, 70%, 80%, 100% if it's an LFP battery. So it's very confusing.
It's confusing, but like you say, the only way to counter that is people who own electric vehicles can tell others. So my siblings, 3 of us own Teslas, and 1 of us doesn't. My sister, and then we just simply say none of us have had any issues with range anxiety. You and I have a friend who has a regular Tesla, real wheel drive, not the long range, and she drove from Seattle all the way to Austin. And back, and not having any issues. And it's like, there is no range anxiety concern for the most part. I mean, it's just overblown.
And on the return trip, she didn't go up the West Coast. She went straight up and then across Canada, where there is far less charging than you would find along the West Coast.
We have all friends everywhere driving all across cross country. You've done it. And Larry Goldberg's done it. No one's had an issue. So it's just overblown, but how do you explain it to people? It's only somebody who has a friend who has one. So that's I think the only way, other than some miraculous reason, the media is going to change their tune.
So one valid point was that, I need a pickup truck and they're not at price parity on pickup trucks. Sure. I need a compact car. They're not at price parity on compact cars. I will say that a lot of people still have in their head that a new car can be purchased for $15,000 or less. A lot of people were saying, well, my last new car was $15,000. That's what I'm going to pay again. I said, which century was that in? Because those cars have not existed for some time. There are very few cars under 20,000, and they're only under 20,000 on paper. The base models really don't exist. They're not on the lots. You might have to special order one. And they're very rare.
Back to your original question, though, how much cheaper does the car EVs have to get? Well, if they're already price parity now off the sticker price, they are much cheaper today, right? Because I don't know why people don't understand that you don't have to pay $100 a month for gas anymore. You don't have to,
or 2 or 3.
yeah, you don't have to pay for any service, or, it's like, it's just shocking to me. The reason I bought my Tesla was because of, they go, I've got range anxiety. And I say to them, don't you have gas price anxiety? Don't you have service anxiety? Because I have service anxiety with my, which I finally just got rid of all my gas cars. But it's like every year you hold on to your gas car, you're worried to hell something part is going to go off. And I've owned so many cars, and every single one of them has had a part. You bring them into the dealer, and whatever they say, it's $3,000, Mr. Ong. Yes, please take care of it.
And
5,000 this time.
I would get,
okay, just do it.
I would get oil change anxiety, because it's not that I can't afford $40, $50 to get an oil change. It's that who's got the time, and they're open during work hours. I have to schedule this out of my life. My time is worth more than that.
Yeah.
So talking about the different market segments, lack of affordable electric vehicles will limit widespread adoption until at least 2028.
Yeah, that might be true, right? Because, I mean, obviously, that's one of the reasons why China is just 2 weeks ago announced that 51% of all new cars are now new electric vehicles, which includes hybrids plus gas cars, or all full electric cars. But that's because they have a plethora, so many options for lower priced cars. And so we don't have that here.
Only 3% of EVs in the U.S. are priced at less than $37,000. 37 is substantial. And if only, I'd like to see 50% of them priced below the average car, because that's how averages work. And Bank of America, it's a fun way to say BOFA, D's nuts. Analysis is based on the assumption that most U.S. consumers will buy it. The sticker does matter. And I did see people saying, well, it has to be at less than the cost of an equivalent gasoline car without incentives. And I'm like, without? But
why?
But there are incentives. I mean, you can argue that for the future we need that, but it's the present, and you're a person buying a car. So you're telling me that the car needs to be $10,000 cheaper for you to consider saving even more money in the future? What are you talking about? I don't get it. So yeah, I think we will see those coming along. I think we will see that. And there is the other myth that I love is that, well, we just don't have the power. We just don't have the power. Yeah. And if every car was electrified today, that'd probably be true. But we're not talking about electrifying every car today. We're talking about just increasing the rate of adoption. So you see things like this here, which shows solar power is shattering global records. This is only up through last year. Last year, they added more than they did entirely. The addition grew by more than it had in previous years. This isn't a stacked chart. This isn't a cumulative chart. This is per year. That's a lot of juice, man. So solar's been gaining popularity.
And the price of lithium it's now at the record low it's ever been. So whether the electric vehicle makers, they can't even get profitability, so that this will help them. But imagine what happens next year. Tesla rolls out, the following year, let's say they start rolling out these more affordable models. Plus you've got robotaxi. So if that comes out, maybe not next year, the following year, you've got, that won't matter that everybody starts buying electric vehicles at that point. Anyways.
Bloomberg forecasts that the solar growth rate will come back down to earth this year, meaning they're not expecting another big year-over-year increase in rate of growth, but that it will still be, but 33% more solar will be installed than was last year. So that it's still going to go up. It's still going to grow, just not by almost double. Instead, it's going to go up by 33%, which would still be more than was deployed just a couple of years ago. I mean, a 33%, that's larger than any of those numbers just in growth in 2024. And this juice is going somewhere, my friends. And we can complain that it's going to, data centers. We can complain that it's going to electric cars. I can share some of those concerns. I think companies like GM should be penalized for making such a grossly inefficient EV as the Hummer. I think it's ridiculous that they would even think about making something so absurd, but people buy it, and I mean specifically about 5.
Exactly. I was going to say, you're shocked that you said that because it's very small numbers. My wife loves the Hummer. She sees the Hummer and goes, "Oh, look, they've got an electric vehicle." And I said, "Yeah." I looked it up, and it was like 2,000 cars that they've sold. That's very small numbers.
It's breathtaking. I was at a EV event in Stillicum recently, and Lightning Ryan Fulcher showed up, and his wife came along, and she looked at the Hummer. There was an electric Hummer there, and she's like, "That's cool. I want to check it out." So we went over and checked it out together, and what was most striking to us was how little interior space there was. The back shelf is at like rib height. It starts at rib. You would think it'd be big enough to hold a wedding reception in there, and it's just not. It feels small inside for something that's the size of an armored Brinks truck. Oh, you guys, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Herbert, thank you so much for joining me. Head on over to Brighter with Herbert. Find out how you can get brighter yourself. Everybody else, like, subscribe, do the usual. Stay tuned and juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots on the next one.